crescendo crisis. The protesters remained outside the embassy for 3 days, their numbers fluctuating, but their presence constant. Inside the crystalline walls, Ember found herself in a strange limbo, unable to leave without facing the crowd, yet increasingly aware of the diplomatic strain her presence was causing. Ambassador Terralyn had made her disapproval abundantly clear during a frost-cold meeting, where the senior Lyrian diplomat had questioned Zoran's judgment in bringing a human musician into their most secure spaces. "Cultural exchange is our mission," Zoran had countered, standing protectively near Ember. "Ms. Reed's musical abilities represent exactly the kind of cross-species harmony we hope to discover on Earth." "Cultural exchange through official channels," Terralyn replied, her silver eyes sharp with disapproval, the patterns beneath her lavender skin configured in what Ember now recognized as formal censure. "Not private concerts that compromise security and inflame anti-Lyrian sentiment." Now, on the evening of the 3rd day, Ember paced the guest quarters she'd been assigned, the elegant space feeling increasingly like a gilded cage. Her phone buzzed with another message from Ryan, the 20th since news of her presence at the embassy had broken in local media. "Just let me know you're safe," her brother had written. "These protests are getting intense." She sent a brief reply, assuring him of her well-being, though safe felt like a relative term. Physically, she was perfectly protected within the embassy. Emotionally, she teetered between the remarkable connection she'd discovered with Zoran and the crushing anxiety of being thrust into public attention, the very situation that had broken her years ago. A gentle chime announced Zoran's arrival. He entered looking weary, the patterns beneath his purple skin muted in a way she'd come to recognize as stress. "The diplomatic corps has reached an agreement with the protest organizers. If we hold a public forum on cultural exchange and address concerns about appropriation, they'll disperse peacefully." "And I'm expected to participate," Ember guessed, feeling her chest tighten at the thought. Zoran moved closer, his expression gentle. "Your participation would be beneficial, but I won't ask that of you if it causes distress." Ember turned away, gazing through the crystalline wall at the distant lights of Manhattan. "I can't do it, Zoran. I can't face them. The last time I performed publicly." She shuddered at the memory. The crushing panic, the humiliation, the collapse of everything she had worked toward. "I understand," he said softly. "There are other solutions." Something in his tone made her turn back. "What aren't you telling me?" Zoran hesitated, then admitted, "Ambassador Terralyn has suggested that perhaps it would be best if you left the embassy quietly. A diplomatic transport could take you anywhere you wish to go, perhaps even another city where you could start fresh." The implication was clear. Her presence had become a liability to the Lyrian mission, to Zoran. "I see. So I'm being asked to disappear, again." "That is Terralyn's suggestion, not mine," Zoran clarified quickly, moving closer. "I believe there's another way forward, but it requires tremendous courage." "Courage I don't have," Ember said bitterly. Zoran's cool fingers gently tilted her chin up until her eyes met his. "You play without disguise for me. You opened yourself to connection despite years of isolation. That requires courage that humbles me, Ember Reed." The sincerity in his silver eyes made her breath catch. Before she could respond, an alarm blared through the embassy, harsh and urgent. "Perimeter breach," Zoran said, instantly alert. He checked his communication device, his expression darkening. "They're targeting the living architecture. The exterior crystalline structures are semi-sentient. Damage to them causes actual pain to the building consciousness." As in confirmation, a subtle tremor ran through the walls around them, accompanied by a discordant tone that made Ember wince. "They're targeting the living architecture," Zoran explained tensely. "I must help coordinate the response," he said, clearly torn between duty and concern for her. "Please remain here where it's safe." "Be careful," Ember urged, genuine fear replacing her personal anxiety. Zoran pressed his forehead briefly to hers, in that intimate Lyrian gesture, then hurried away, leaving her alone with the security feeds that showed the situation deteriorating. The protesters had begun spraying some kind of chemical on the crystalline structures, causing them to dull and discolor. With each application, the embassy itself seemed to shudder, the discordant tones growing more pronounced, like an instrument being tortured. Without conscious thought, Ember reached for her violin. The building's pain resonated with something deep inside her, the memory of music interrupted, of harmony destroyed. Before she could question her actions, she was playing, creating a counter-melody to the dissonance, instinctively seeking to soothe the living architecture. The walls around her responded, their crystalline structure brightening where the notes touched them. Encouraged, Ember continued, losing herself in the healing composition that flowed through her fingers. On the security feed, she saw something remarkable. The damaged sections of the exterior beginning to pulse with renewed light, fighting off the effects of the chemical attack. The Lyrian security personnel noticed as well, several turning toward the building with expressions of wonder. Then the feed showed Zoran confronting one of the protesters who had broken away from the others, a large man wielding what looked like a sledgehammer. Even as security personnel rushed towards them, the man swung the weapon at a primary support crystal. Zoran moved with unexpected speed, placing himself between the hammer and the crystal. The impact sent him sprawling across the ground, the patterns beneath his purple skin flashing chaotically in what could only be pain. The violin slipped from her suddenly numb fingers. Zoran was hurt. Because of her, because of what she had brought to the embassy's door. For a moment, crushing panic threatened to overwhelm her. Then something shifted inside her mind. Anxiety transforming into clarity, fear into resolve. Without stopping to second-guess herself, Ember left her quarters following the internal layout she had memorized during her stays. Embassy staff rushed past her, too focused on the emergency to question her presence. The main entrance loomed ahead. Beyond it, the chaos of the protest and the flashing lights of police vehicles. She hesitated only briefly before pushing through the doors. Outside, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Security forming a perimeter, police separating the remaining protesters from embassy grounds, medical personnel attending to the injured. She spotted Zoran sitting on a low wall, a medical technician examining a darkened area on his shoulder where the luminescent patterns flowed sluggishly. Without considering the cameras, the crowd, or the officials who might recognize her, Ember ran to him. "Zoran," she called, pushing past a security officer who tried to intercept her. "Are you badly hurt?" she interrupted, kneeling beside him, hands hovering uncertainly over his injured shoulder. "The injury is superficial," he assured her, though the disrupted patterns beneath his skin suggested otherwise. "But you, the crowd, your anxiety, doesn't matter right now," she said firmly, surprising herself with her steadiness. "You were injured protecting something beautiful, because of me." "Not because of you," Zoran corrected gently, "because of ignorance and fear. Never blame yourself for others' failures of understanding." A commotion behind them drew their attention. Ambassador Terralyn had emerged from the embassy, her tall figure commanding immediate respect as she approached a group of human officials. Among them, Ember recognized the mayor and the State Department's liaison to extraterrestrial affairs. "This attack represents a serious diplomatic incident," Terralyn was saying, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "The Lyrian Council will require assurances that Earth can provide adequate protection for its representatives." "We condemn these actions in the strongest terms possible," the State Department's liaison replied. "The individuals responsible will face serious charges." The individuals are merely symptoms of a deeper disharmony, one exacerbated by unauthorized cultural appropriation. Her silver eyes fixed directly on Ember, who felt the familiar fluttering of panic beginning in her chest. But as Zoran's hand found hers, that steadying resonance flowing between them, something unexpected happened. Instead of overwhelming her, the anxiety crystallized into determination. Rising to her feet, still holding Zoran's hand, Ember stepped forward. "Ambassador Terrelin," she said, her voice clearer and stronger than she had thought possible in such a public moment, "I request permission to address this misconception directly."
"And my music," Ember began, trying to process this information. "Your composition contained perfect fifth-dimensional harmonics, what we call Ethereum resonance. It's extraordinarily rare, even among Lyrians." Zoran leaned forward slightly. "May I ask where you learned it?" Ember's fingers traced the worn edges of her violin case. "I didn't learn it anywhere. The music just comes to me. Always has, since I was little." She hesitated, then added, "It's the only time I feel safe." "Your anxiety disorder," Zoran said, not as a question but with understanding. "The harmonic disturbance I sensed in the plaza. Your nervous system produces discordant frequencies when stressed." Any other time, Ember would have bristled at someone so casually diagnosing her condition. Instead, she felt relief at his matter-of-fact assessment. "The doctors called it severe social anxiety with panic disorder. It destroyed my career before it began. I was a Juilliard until I—" She swallowed hard. "Until I couldn't perform anymore. Not in front of people. Not when they were watching me, judging me." Zoran was silent for a moment, the patterns beneath his skin shifting to deeper purples. "Would you play here?" he asked gently. "Just for yourself. This space is acoustically isolated. No one would hear but me." Ember hesitated. Playing for a single audience member was usually just as terrifying as playing for a crowd. But something about Zoran's presence felt different, as if he emanated the same sense of safety her music normally provided. Slowly, she opened her case and lifted the violin. It was a beautiful instrument, the one luxury she had kept after leaving Juilliard, though it had nearly been pawned countless times during lean months. She positioned it against her shoulder, feeling the familiar wood against her skin. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if I failed here, too? What if— "Don't think of it as performance," Zoran suggested, as if reading her hesitation. "Think of it as conversation." Ember took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were tentative, but as the music flowed, something extraordinary happened. The crystalline walls of the pavilion began to respond, not just reflecting sound, but enhancing it, adding subtle harmonics that complemented her playing. Colors rippled across the surfaces in perfect synchronization with her melody. More remarkable was Zoran's reaction. The patterns beneath his purple skin began to pulse and flow with the music, creating visual symphonies that matched her auditory creation. His silver eyes half closed in what appeared to be profound pleasure or deep meditation. Ember felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the pure joy of music without fear. Her composition evolved, incorporating elements she'd never consciously explored, as if the pavilion itself was collaborating with her. When the final note faded, she realized she was crying, silent tears of release streaming down her face. "That," Zoran said softly, his voice thick with emotion she hadn't expected from the composed diplomat, "was Sivara, soul speaking. On my world, such music is sacred." The patterns beneath his purple skin were still rippling with after effects, and Ember found herself fascinated by their movement. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers hovering near but not touching his arm. "May I?" she asked. Zoran nodded, an unexpectedly human gesture from his otherwise alien demeanor. Ember's fingers gently touched his forearm. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced. Cool, but not cold, with a subtle electrical current that seemed to flow between them. Beneath her fingertips, the luminescent patterns responded, swirling around the point of contact like ripples in water. "Your music creates these patterns?" she asked, withdrawing her hand reluctantly. "Your music," he corrected. "What you see is how Lyrians physically experience profound harmonics. It's intimate," he added, a darker purple flush rising to his cheeks. "On my world, such a response would only be shared with close companions." Ember felt her own face warm with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize," Zoran interrupted gently. "I brought you here hoping to witness exactly this phenomenon. I simply didn't expect it to be so intense." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Through the pavilion's translucent ceiling, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. "What happens now?" Ember finally asked. Zoran studied her with those silver eyes that seemed to see beyond her carefully constructed defenses. "That depends on what you want, Ember Reed. I can offer you a place to practice where your gift can flourish without the anxiety that plagues you. I can teach you about Lyrian music theory, help you understand the natural ability you possess." "And what do you get from this arrangement?" she asked, not with suspicion but genuine curiosity. The patterns beneath Zoran's skin formed complex configurations she couldn't interpret. "The sound of home," he said simply, "and perhaps the opportunity to understand how a human musician can create resonances that, by all scientific understanding, should be impossible for your species." He stood, extending his hand as he had in the park, a formal gesture that somehow conveyed respect rather than presumption. "Will you return tomorrow? There is much more I would share with you about how our peoples might find harmony together." As Ember placed her hand in his, feeling that calming resonance flow between them, Ember realized she had gone an entire hour without a single tremor of anxiety. For someone who had lived in constant fear for years, it felt like breathing clean air after a lifetime underground. "I'll come," she promised, finding courage in the gentle silver of his gaze. "Tomorrow." As Zoran escorted her to a diplomatic vehicle that would take her home, Ember felt something unfamiliar blossoming within her. Not just the absence of fear, but the presence of hope. Like a silent symphony, beginning to find its voice after years of muted existence. Dissonant warnings. "You need to be careful, Ember. These aliens, we don't really know what they want." Ember's brother Ryan paced her small apartment, his police uniform still on from his night shift. He'd stopped by after she'd mentioned her daily visits to the Lyrian embassy over the past 2 weeks. "Zoran isn't like that," Ember countered. "The Lyrians are peaceful. They've been nothing but diplomatic since their arrival." "That's their job. Being diplomatic doesn't mean we know their true intentions." Ryan ran his hair through his hair, frustration evident. "And this interest in your music, doesn't that seem suspicious to you?" Ember sighed, facing her brother with more confidence than she'd felt in years. "My music resonates with their physiology in ways they didn't expect from humans. It's a scientific curiosity for them, not some sinister plot." What she didn't tell her brother was how those daily sessions in Zoran's pavilion had transformed her. How for the first time since her breakdown at Juilliard, she played without fear, without trembling. How Zoran had begun teaching her Lyrian composition techniques that made her music transcend anything she'd created before. And she certainly didn't mention the growing connection between them, the way Zoran's silver eyes followed her movements, how the patterns beneath his purple skin formed complex, beautiful configurations when their hands accidentally touched, and how their conversations stretched into hours that passed like minutes. "Just be careful," Ryan finally conceded, hugging her awkwardly. "You've been hurt enough already." As her brother left, Ember wondered if he was right to be concerned. Was she seeing this relationship clearly, or was she just grateful for the first person in years who made her feel something other than fear? Later that afternoon, in the crystalline pavilion, Ember shared these doubts with Zoran as they worked on translating a Lyrian composition for her violin. "Your brother's concern is understandable," Zoran said, adjusting the notation on the holographic display between them. "Humans have long imagined alien contact as potentially dangerous. Your literature is filled with invasions and conquests." "And what does Lyrian literature say about encountering new species?" Ember asked, curious. The patterns beneath Zoran's skin shifted into what she now recognized as amusement. "Our earliest writings speak of harmony among the diverse instruments of the universe. We've encountered 4 other spacefaring civilizations before Earth. All remain our allies." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "Though I should admit that not all my colleagues approve of my time with you. Ambassador Terrelin believes I'm becoming too personally involved." "Are you?" Ember asked, her heart suddenly racing for reasons entirely unrelated to anxiety. Zoran's silver eyes met hers, the patterns beneath his purple skin pulsing with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "By Lyrian diplomatic standards, yes. By my own judgment, I find myself looking forward to our sessions with anticipation that exceeds professional interest." The admission hung between them, delicate as a perfect harmonic.